My young neighbor was extremely excited for Independence Day until he realized he couldn't go to the school because of the virus. I don't know if he knows what independence means. I don't know what his idea of freedom is. But I do know we at Sakshi want to add to that happiness. I, as a Rakshan, want to make this nation a safe space where all children are safe from child sexual abuse. Hi, I'm Sangram Bhandari.
And I am Ananya Soni, and we are your hosts for the evening. On We the Rakshans of India, we are very excited to have with us Monisha Singh Diwan. Monisha Singh Diwan is the director at Mighty Hearts, an early childhood consultancy based out of India. She has, in the recent years, worked as an early childhood consultant with UNESCO Asia Pacific and UNICEF East Asia Pacific Regional Office, Bangkok, in particular as coordinator of the interventions on early childhood and social emotional learning. She brings with her over 20 years of experience, especially in early childhood development and workforce professional development, and caregiving interventions in particular. She has a master's in human development and family studies from the US MS University of Baroda, India, and graduate degrees in child development and education. She has contributed as a steering committee member at Early Childhood International and national networks and works concertedly in bettering childhoods through various policy to practice bridging and programmatic interventions.
Thank you for
Hi,
joining us.
hi Ananya and hi Sangram, and so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me in.
Yeah. So, thank you for joining us on this Independence Day. We're sure that what you say today will inspire the 40 like youth actions we are reaching out across the nation and understand the nuances of freedom and be active preventers of harm. So, to start off, Monisha, I'd like to ask you, what are the three words that you'll use to describe yourself?
Hmm. um, I would say essentially, I'm courageous. I have loads of courage.
Okay.
I'm compassionate, and I'm a seeker. I just am a seeker of knowledge, of learning, of knowing myself more day by day, and then in that process, understanding the world around me. That's a continuous process. Thank you.
Okay. So, were you always like this, or was this these was did you arrive at this once you started working in early child development, or were you always like this?
Oh boy, that's a very loaded question. So I would start with where courage is concerned. No way. I was a um, very shy child by virtue of the life I lived, growing up in a very patriarchal, part of the world, in reasonably patriarchal families and the communities, constantly being reminded that I'm a girl, so I should be apologetic about it. Very subtle, but that world is made differently for girls. So I would say that if I look at phenomenally the shift over the years that's happened with me, so courage is a new quality, and I continue to develop that. Compassion I always had, I felt, because I always had it in me to um, have more heart for the more vulnerable, be it animals, be it children, be it the aged, be it people who are suffering. So I would say those, and that has been again through the experiences that I had in childhood, looking at growing up, looking at parents who were who were that caring towards others, and again positively in the community I was in, which was reaching out to the more vulnerable. So that I would say was there. Seeking knowledge, I would totally attribute to my best friends, which were the books. So I think being shy, I just naturally moved to get into the world of the written world, and the vistas opened up for me, And that kind of sparked off this interest to continuously keep learning more and keep expanding my horizons. Yeah.
So you spoke about the patriarchal society. So do you believe that the situation for women especially is slightly better than what it was when you were younger?
You know, Ananya, it's very loaded because when you look at the country, our country, and today the 74th Independence Day that we're, celebrating, um, I find this statement very difficult to answer because I find it a bit dangerous. You know, the world was still black and white in my days. Um, I find now there are newer ways and nuances within which patriarchies are practiced. Um, People have become very well versed to cloak it better. So, for example, you won't have outright dowry. It's a frowned word, and it's a four-letter word if you're practicing that. But we know the reality that it's happening, right? We know that there's discrimination happening with women at every sphere in life. It's very subtle. It's not pronounced. And no doubt the positive is that there are a lot of laws now, legal frameworks which are protective. How far they are practiced is another, it's another discussion altogether. But yes, on the positive, I think if I were to say so, the most positive shift I see is in the men, the young men themselves, where the young men who are coming out and supporting the rights of women, and I think the number is slowly and steadily growing. I see that in urban India. And I love to be part of that shift that I'm seeing, not just women for women, but men for women, men and women for different um, differences in human proclivities. When we talk about, uh, our inclinations, and you're finding people more and more standing up. Really, I have a young son. My son's 24, and we have these discussions often. And I'm very, very proud of your generation of young people who are really drawing the discourse to where it's needed. But you're not just talking about things, you're doing things. Our generation has been a lot about talk. So I'll be very clear about it. What I like is that the young people today, don't want to club them into the Gen Zs or the millennials, but I would say they're a whole lot more action oriented. They're getting up and doing things. So yes, I think it's change that is happening. I would like the change to be a whole lot faster, quicker, but I'd rather that the change be there to stay, you know. And women very strongly finding their voice. It's very different when we go to the rural part of the country or the tribal or the peri-urban. We find the change, or smaller towns, there's so much of shift. I live in Bombay. I'm currently in Baroda because of COVID, just kind of few months here. And I find myself, there's so much of change in the way the discussions happen. So it's a long way to go.
Thank you. So you have experience working with children, and so what would you say about that? And also you've engaged with children in India and abroad. So you must have noticed some startling differences and similarities. So would you like to tell us about those?
Wow. So ever since I, kind of was clear about where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do, it was to work with children. And I'm very fortunate that I'm working with early childhood. So just to kind of lay the context that when we talk about early childhood, we're really talking about right from, conception to age 8. That's what is defined as. Of course, childhood is 0 to 18 years, but we're talking about conception to age 8. And I've been fortunate, Ananya and Sangram, to have worked in very, very varied geographies. So I've really worked in very mufassil locations of the country, as well as very elite urban setups in the country as well as overseas. So one thing that unites is Uh, the need for children to have a nurturant environment is no different whether a child is there in the gully, mohalla, or the child is in a fancy mansion. And for us to simplify, the child who's in this fancy mansion is getting all that that child needs is grossly wrong. You might actually, and I have instances where a child in that gully mohalla with a bare minimum is getting much more richer a nurturance than the child who's got all the resources, physical and material, but is not getting what they really, really need. Stimulating care, a safe environment, secure people who are going to be looking after their well being, where the child can really grow freely into whatever potential they have and whatever their their journey is. So my work has been essentially, of course, in India, but also in the Asia Pacific. And it's been one thing that unites is that in this entire region, Asia, when we look at Asia and the Pacific, family still is a very, very integral, important part where children grow. So and family and community is given a lot of importance. And for children to grow well, it's really about families taking that responsibility, but not just the family. And when I say family, I mean not just the parents who brought the child into the world, but the dada dadi, nana nani, uncles. Everybody has a role to play. The community, the neighborhood has a role to play. And the responsibility, not just for your children, but for every child that you see around, growing up well, thriving, has to be there. I think it's something which we owe, you know, for our presence in the world. I mean, that's the way I feel. All of us have to look out for children. And so, yeah, the difference is I would say that there are countries where governments are very proactive. So I would make a statement here that our government is very good at making these very good policies. I would just like to have very stringent implementation mechanisms so that those policies see the light of day, they happen. People who are the most vulnerable are aware of those policies, and they have protectors who can kind of be the links to ensure that these policies are understood and they are able to access them for their well-being and for their families and for their children. The policies are there. We are great paper tigers. Indians are very good at that. 74th year of independence. I would say hats off. We are great paper tigers. I'm really looking forward to change happening. And I'm saying this to you that with you youngsters there, and as I said, I started off action orientedness. I think the nation's going to be in safer hands because you're not just going to go and look at documents. You'll say, now what next? Let's get it on the ground, right? So it's a big task, things that my gen and the gens before have not done very well. It's a big, big ask, but things have to work on the ground. I think our countries sort of poised there. So there are a lot of countries I see. I worked a lot in Vietnam. I was always very, very sort of impressed by the government's hands-on work to ensure that early children in the early years thrive. So everything was kind of linked there. I did work in Cambodia, in Fiji, some work in Thailand, and I'm really happy by proactiveness. So while a bottoms-up approach is the way to work, you need the policy makers and people at the top, to make it happen with the right financial, backing, with the right frameworks, kind of right till the last bit, kind of tying it up well together. So yes, that's kind of. But on the positive note, the national education policy, which has just come out, and since I work in education, I'm very hopeful that there is a policy which has put early childhood care in education, has recognized its relevance. Globally, it has been recognized very well as the first most important critical window of opportunity. It's where 85% of the brain development happens. And if mess ups happen there which cause toxic stress, the setback for the child can sometimes not be overcome in a whole lifetime. So it's a very critical time to provide a very safe, secure, nurturant environment for children.
Okay. Well, so, so can you like highlight like certain give an example to summarize, like you were talking about the differences in the like in our country and the other countries, right? So can you like would it be possible for you to give an example or an incident that you can share to highlight that, like the implementation, the change in the implementation?
Okay. I'll give you a beautiful example, and it's all linked. So some years back, I was working for the Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood. It's called ARNEC. It's a stellar network which brings in professionals from across the globe and who work on policies, or who work on good practices, and they work with countries, with governments, with organizations. So I was fortunate to be a steering committee member for a couple of years with this organization. And we used to have these conferences and meets. So what really stands out, and I'm going to give you some examples. So we used to have these workshops to bring in new practices, to kind of deconstruct that early years है तो क्या करना है न्यूट्रिशन को लेकर, चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन को लेकर, एजुकेशन कैसा होना चाहिए, गुड प्रैक्टिसेस क्या हैं वगैरह. So there was this. I remember this very vividly. There was this introduction of this child development tool, track how children are developing, and there was this workshop happening. Okay, so we are in this workshop, a small group, and there's this one gentleman who's asking very pertinent questions. In that small group, he happened to be in my small group. Okay, so we are having these discussions. We have to do this brainstorming and come out with something. This person, who must be around my age, I shall not tell you how old I am, but age, and we're talking, and he's like, he's got pertinent questions. He's making these notes, very down to earth, coming out with things and all. And we had a lovely, lovely session, very vibrant. We were just around 6, 7 of us doing this little thing. And then I asked him, I introduced myself, and I said, I'm from India, and I'm working with Arne, and blah, blah. And who are you? And he introduced himself. He was the education minister of Cambodia. And he was the most keen student there, the most keen learner. My second example, I did some intense work in Vietnam, and on social emotional learning, and it was a long journey when I was with UNICEF, and after I did my work with UNICEF, I worked directly with the government in Vietnam, in the country. When we were working and we were on ground, it's like, imagine in India, you are visiting the Anganwadi, you're going to the ICDS centers, and you're visiting some areas, very mufassir locations where there are lots of issues, community, culturally, etc. So I was introducing a tool and a system of working. So I'd love to share this. And when I went there, who was with me? It was a whole Ministry of Education people who were with me to learn on the job. So when I'm sharing with them skills of observing learning, or how exactly you interact with teachers, what are you observing for, how do you support, how do you mentor, what do you look for, whether it's in early childhood, whether you're looking at physical environment, what is the curriculum like, or the teacher herself, her interactions, etc., or the parental interactions, you're looking at policies, blah, blah. Every step, they were like keen learners, and the whole group was there. And most importantly, there were no airs कि हम ये मिनिस्टर हैं, हम ये हैं, अभी हमको सलाम करो, अभी हमारे लिए चाय पकड़ो. So for me, this was very refreshing, and everybody, and it's interesting because they were they were people who were provincial people, who were the Ministry of Education and Training heads, There were people who were the district leads. There were people who were at the zonal level, and people who were the local government people. All of them worked in such a way. Believe you me, if you look at that group, it's difficult. I trained around 90 plus people there. It's difficult for you to know who's the person in the hierarchy at the top or so-called bottom. The people who were actually interacting directly with children, who were at the grassroots, were the people who were the most celebrated, the most respected. And the role of the others was to provide that service of support, to link up policy to their practice, to be the bridge, but not to say कि अब हम आ गए हैं अब हमारे लिए भाई red carpet डालो. So that stays with me, and I think unless, and to me that is frankly that's the way things should be, right? That happens, there'll be nothing that will stop us from doing what we can, the possibilities that we have.
So like the people over there, like they were more proactively involved. Like starting from the bottom to the top, they were just proactively involved in every step. They just like were eager to know.
And
Okay.
Sangram also, they were qualified to be there. They were
Yeah.
qualified to be there. So they had the requisite education to be able to contribute to education, right? They had that.
No. Okay. Yeah. That's thought provoking to be sure.
Very
Yes.
interesting story, yes.
So the next question that I'd like to ask you, that would be like, how has your experience been like working with children? You've engaged with children in India and abroad. Like, are there differences in the children, like in India, abroad, the way they interpret with things and so?
Yes. Very, very good question, Sangram. That's beautiful. So let me just put it this way that the way, so because my area of work is a lot focused around socio-emotional learning, I'll share some few things with you. For example, in parts of Asia, lot of sound, sorry, I don't know. So in parts of Asia, uh, there are there is culturally it is it is not encouraged that you share your big emotions. Okay, when you look at Asia, when I look at Asia, East Asia, so I'm looking at East Asia, people do not share the big emotions. So for example, इंडिया को देखो तो हम लोग हमारे इमोशंस काफी हद तक शेयर करते हैं. हाँ, गुस्सा आया तो हम गुस्सा दिखाते हैं, हैप्पीनेस है तो हमारी शक्ल से दिखता है हैप्पी है. तो एक अलग सा एक बिहेवियर होता है. उसको भी एक एनालाइज करना जरूरी है. But there are parts of the world, and especially when I looked at my work in parts of Asia, East Asia, where big emotions were not shown. It was like something you internalize, right? That kind of internalization at times causes a lot of mental health issues. So when I was working with teachers, and during my training, I do a lot of work around self-awareness, around a work where people start kind of going to their childhoods and all. I had a lot of people breaking down. I had a lot of people who had tears which wouldn't stop because they culturally have never ever delved into what makes them be what they are or their feelings, etc. It's all sublimated. That's something I saw, and that of course that culturally passes on to children. So we were trying to break that because for children to be able to express themselves freely, etc. Because part of socio-emotional learning is about self-awareness. When I look at our country, I see a lot of work that I've done where we are in this false notion of always being happy. So it's like smile. You're telling the child also, chalo smile karo, chalo hasso. Okay, you do it once, you do it twice, Or if a child falls down and feels hurt and is coming to you, so what do we say? We say, कुछ नहीं हुआ, चिंटी मर गई, कुछ नहीं हुआ. अरे बाबा कैसे नहीं हुआ? मैं अगर बच्चा हूं, मुझे दर्द हो रही है. I don't like this torn skin on my knee. I'm going through this friction burn which is hurting like hell. But you as an adult are telling me your feelings are not important. And I'm just talking about something very simple. You go deeper when a child has been abused, molested, The child is coming to so-called significant person who he can depend on, and the person says, "बेटा कुछ नहीं हुआ, आप चुप रहो, ये सीक्रेट रखना, ऐसा बोलोगे तो पापा गुस्सा हो जाएंगे, मैं आपसे बात नहीं करूंगी." सब लोग बोलेंगे छी छी. You see, and these are realities because it disturbs our adulting, it disturbs our comfort zone. So we gag the child, we gag the child. And slowly and steadily, that gagging becomes part of that child's being. The child continues going through things which are not right, continues to be gagged at school, by the peers, by the community. And there's so many people, Ananya and Sangram, who my age in their 40s, they are opening up about things. So let me just say, it's not in jest when I say the things that are happening in the first five last the rest of your life. You cannot, it's not something which gets all right. And it becomes part of your persona. Some of us are able to get over it because of either we found the right environment, we found the champion, whatever. For example, think where I'm concerned, my area of work has really been what has given me courage. Sangram, you asked in the beginning. So courage for me is, I'm just fortunate to work in an area of work which gives me that kind of strength for myself and for others, For a lot of people, it doesn't happen. They don't have champions in their life. They don't have workspaces which are degagging them. And I feel very, very sad because it's a life lost, and it's a life lost. So my work is really about starting early, about bettering childhoods, working with families, because I'm very, very fearful that children are living in fear. So I want that fear, that four-letter word, not to be part of children's lives and not to be part of the lives of adults who are responsible to care for them.
My connection for a moment.
I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll be taking questions from the audience. So I would like to ask you that very often, especially in India, we face the problem of adultism. Sakshi has been talking about adultism quite a bit. And adultism systematically dehumanizes children by not valuing their opinions. And there's this notion that the parent's opinion is final. Even in the very popular show Indian Matchmaking, it has been showing very clear instances of the same. So what are your suggestions? What do you think we can do to tackle this problem?
Oh boy, yeah. I actually like that show has come on because it started a much needed discourse. So adultism, I would, because Sakshi works in the area of CSA and against gender-based violence, I would like to take it from that lens. I just put down some points where it starts. I think first and foremost, it starts with adults not taking themselves seriously, or the definition of what an adult is, kind of breaking that. I think our definition of what an adult is has been totally misconstrued. So I feel first and foremost, where adults are concerned, and this is for the entire early years, as well as from the lens of CSA, letting children, focusing on children being, not becoming. So being in the here and now, responding to children's needs, their abilities as of now, it also has larger implications because this whole thing of child readiness for the next level, or how will this child be when the child grows up, I feel this should be picked up and garbaged. The child is now staring you in the face today, now. What are you doing for the child now? Are you letting the child be? Or are you trying to fix the child into what your limited perception of what the child should be is? I think COVID has brought that on our face. That, there can be nothing which is permanent. There's nothing which is certain. We are in a world of volatility, and therefore we are not in a position to say, this is what we are preparing our child to be. Let's not prepare our child. Let's let our child be. provide a good, environment for the child to grow in. So that is my first thing. The second thing I feel, which is very important, is what adults need to do is really, really focus mindfully on relationships. What are they doing for relationships, building relationships with the child? So I had written this article some years back where I'd said that, if you want your child to uh, employ you back as their consultant when they grow up, you must invest in these years that they feel that you're worthy enough to be their consultant, let's say at your age. I'm sure some of you have employed your parents back as your consultants. I'm sure about that. Because you feel, okay, in the conversations with my mom or dad, it kind of, helps me. I like their perspectives. I like to have that argument with them, etc. It's a lot of that relationship is at the early stage. And that's not something, it's just being mindful. What exactly are you doing for the child? Your role is not just to feed the child, care and, whatever, give them those things, but whatever other conversations. So I do a lot of parent coaching where I say just break the whole instruction mode. Fed up of instructions, break the instruction mode. And Ananya, what you said, Indian matchmaking is all about instructions. Even a child, I'm calling the person 30-year-old a child because the behavior is like a child. The mom is instructing them on what to do, what to be, right? And they're not able to, they're gagged. There's the gagging syndrome which continues. So I think relationships is the second thing. A lot of play. Uh, Play creates a space where children can express themselves more freely. Uh, and parents themselves need to model consent and boundaries. I feel parents do not model them, so they don't follow consent and boundaries themselves. Children will learn what they see. Are parents modeling that? It doesn't no really mean no. Are they respecting each other's physical and emotional boundaries? You know, and that's important. Being respectful of adults. What are the conversations in COVID when you're stuck? I'm really worried about children, and I'm hearing this more and more. Children are privy to conversations which are the mess ups in the house, and they're forming opinions about religion, about politics, about getting prejudiced, getting biased, forming emotional stories which are going to not hold them well. So there are issues around that. Teaching children body safety, and I think a lot of people, I just want to just share this, and this incident stays with me. Many years back, there was this little girl who I rescued, and she used to come to my center, my care center, and she just came. She used to come from school directly. The van guy would leave, and she came in, and she said, she comes to me and she says, Monisha Didi, मेरा driver ने छोटू pencil डाला, छोटू pencil डाला, छोटू pencil डाला. And she went on with Chotu pencil dala, very agitated. I got very disturbed. So I kept talking to her and saying, Beta, Chotu pencil kya dala? I thought she has a van guy taken a pencil out of a box, some favorite pencil of hers or what. I took out some dolls and said, pull dolls in a bag, Polo mujhe batao kya tha. Now the thing is, the body parts, the names we give them. I want to just say this because the larger discourse is around CSA. Naming body parts as they are is important. Now here, as a person who was responsible for caring for her, I was concerned and I had a half an hour different role play with her because I saw she's agitated. I could have just told somebody that, okay, chalo, khana khila do, let her sleep, she's come back, let her have a nap. She looked agitated. I went through stories and stuff because something didn't gel. It turned out to be the van guy was basically inserting a pencil into a vagina, which she called Chotu because her mama used to call it Chotu. So as Chotu pencil dala could have been just put aside as Chotu pencil dala. So my whole thing to parents, to everybody working with children is call a spade, yeah. Don't have those 10,000 monikers for it. And there's no chichi associated with the vagina or with the penis. So just call it the way it is. It's a part of the body. And what young children go through is with this is, I think the trauma is absolutely magnified because now you are somebody who can't understand what they're saying. And the trauma's in them. And the fear is that trauma will continue. For how long would that guy have continued, abusing her without anybody getting to know about it? So this is my whole thing that Children are absolutely capable, and they are at times I find them more capable than we are to have real conversations with. So please do not treat them like ये तो बच्चा है, ये तो बच्चा है नहीं है. वो बच्चा आपको देख रहा है, बच्चा आपके आपसे सीख रहा है, और ये आपके लिए एक सेकंड चांस है कि आप अपने फियर्स, अपनी दुविधाएं, अपने इश्यूज को आप सॉर्ट कर सकें. I just think it's a way when you have children with you, it's a way you can reinvent yourself and deal with your issues and be better adults for children in your care than you were ever fortunate to have. Let me put it that way.
Like there is so much to take from this conversation, and the point that you say about using the right language, like this is something that we are essentially working for. But yeah, like to kind of summarize this, like I just want to say that the whatever you said, the insights and the learnings that we just had in this conversation, the conversations that are important for these things to be highlighted. These issues to be highlighted is very critical. So I guess this conversation, like it should be inspiring enough for our young Rakshans when they look at their own lives, and this will help us to.
I think we lost Sangram there. There's been a connection issue. But I would now like to throw open this discussion to our audience and see if anybody has anything else they want to ask our very amazing guest. And thank you so much for sharing this story with us.
Thank
So
you so much, Ananya. Thank you so much. And I would just like to share that ages back in that center, there was a young, bright, curious spark of a girl who I'm immensely proud to say on this stage is right here with me, Ananya. And I met her as a 4-year-old, and she always had so many questions. And her favorite word was why and why not. So I remember that very, very fondly.
okay, thank you so much. We have Sangram back with us, and we also have a question. I think it's on your screen, so would you like to answer it?
Yes. So Ayush has asked me this question. Ma'am, do you think Japan's system of karoshi, overwork death, is an affecting factor in the later stage of not being able to share your feeling? I do not know about karoshi, but I do know that they have a system where young children, from the early years point of view, where young children experience loneliness purposely. So the Western world is, when you look at the West and India, which is aping the West, a larger part of India is aping the West blindly. It's about the child should be constantly occupied in all their wakeful hours. बच्चे को अकेला नहीं छोड़ना है. Boredom is a 4-letter word. On the contrary, in Japan, they have a system where they purposely, part of their curriculum and their being, let children experience loneliness and solitude. And the reason is because research has said experiencing solitude, it does not mean that you are lonely actually, it's just that you're alone. You are with your own devices, not your screen devices, not people coming and entertaining you, but you're with your own devices. And that's a time where you learn to be with your best friend. And who's your best friend?
Yourself.
It's us. We forget that. We have to be our best friends. And how will you discover yourself if you don't get a chance to know yourself? So they actually let children experience times of solitude, times of loneliness. So children learn to be solitary. Children learn to be alone. And having said that, remember, Japan is a very community, very cohesive culture. So it's not, unless I experience myself and I love myself, I celebrate myself, how can I do it for others? पहले मैं अपने आप को तो जानू बूझूं, तभी तो मैं दूसरों के लिए कुछ कर सकती हूँ. And वो understanding वो starting से करते हैं. Know yourself, love yourself, understand yourself, your proclivities, your emotions, what makes you tick. And it's done beautifully and naturally. Not like, अभी ये period है, यहाँ पे हम अकेला बैठेंगे. ऐसा नहीं. Not like moral education class. It's done in a very natural form, you know. And then there's so much more that you can give to the community. And this is a core essence of how they are an empathic culture. They're very high on empathy, on compassion. So for me, and you can't just pick up Japanese way of functioning and put it in India. You can't do that. However, you can learn from these very, very positive practices and know that how can we build compassion, gratitude, um, celebrating self, having a positive regard for ourselves. So that's something I pick up from Japan. I'm sorry, Ayush, I cannot comment on what you've written because I don't know much about it.
Sangram, you muted yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So like as I was saying, like your insights and sharing, they'll do a long way in inspiring our young Russians when they look at their own lives and try to make meaning of their experiences in their life and strive for true independence. And on that note, I'd like to tell you a little about how we at Sakshi, through the Rakshan project, are in process of engaging with 40 lakh youth in our country to stop child sexual abuse.
At Sakshi, we have a very simple maxim: ना करेंगे ना करने देंगे. हो रहा है तो रोक के रहेंगे और अगर हुआ है तो बोल के रहेंगे. I would also like to tell you about Sakshi's campaign, Make Home a Safe Space, on Keto. So you can visit our Keto campaign and encourage us to create a Rakshan in each home. A Rakshan is someone who is capable of de-escalating violence and preventing child sexual abuse.
Awesome. More speed
Yeah.
to all of you. I think it's a beautiful project and I would love to be associated with it. So, more speed to all of you to impact more youth across the country to be Rakshans.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you
So,
so much.
Monisha, yeah, so Monisha, I'd like to invite you and also our viewers to the preview webinar that happens every Sunday. Like it's also happening tomorrow. It is for anyone who wants to join the movement against child sexual abuse and become a Rakshan who can create a safe space. And would you, I won't ask you this question, like, would you identify yourself as a Rakshan? Because I think you're already a Rakshan. But I'd really like if you just join the webinar tomorrow because it also can, like, the things that you're talking about, and it resonates, right? So it will be really nice to have you on board with us.
Would love to. And thank you so much, Sangram. Thank you, Ananya. Beautiful discussion with both of you. Thank you very much. And to all the people who are watching in.
Thank you so much for joining us. And now, as we end the program, I would also like to thank Ritu Rastogi and Supratim Sen from R2, which is a US-based company, for supporting this live. I would also like to thank Fire Events for their support. So, to all our viewers and Monisha, today I leave you with a small pledge that we, the Rakshans of India, are taking a step towards preventing harm, stopping child sexual abuse, and making home a safe space. I hope that all of you enjoy the rest of the program. Stay tuned. Thank you, and wishing you a very happy Independence Day from all of us at Sakshi.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe, we were told. But what if homes are not safe for 1 out of 2 children in our country? Sakshi has been working to make homes safe for the last 28 years. At this critical time, we've stepped up what we've been doing because every home has to be a safe space.